do you think that Nigeria's elections would throw up a leader that Nigerians truly deserve?
Unfortunately, my answer to that question would be no.
No.
Yes, no. I would have had great hope in the Electoral Act if the players were sincere, right? But the players are not sincere. I, for once, had hope that because of the digital process, I've explained here and other platforms that the digital process of the new electoral, law would leave a digital trail. By that I mean a digital footprint. So essentially, every PVC properly registered and issued leaves a digital trail. That means a digital footprint that can be traced, right? Now, every vote casted by everybody who was properly registered through the system leaves another digital footprint. That is to say that all of these are evidence. And so if the election were to be rigged, which I strongly believe is going to be the case, then there will be a series of litigation that will demand going into the system to print that digital footprint. And hopefully that will be used to determine the next president of Nigeria. But make no mistake about it, 2023 election is going to be rigged.
Why do you say it's going to be rigged? I mean, a whole lot of persons are excited about the new Electoral Act. And I mean, Ekiti, Oshun.
Yes.
I mean, we were all excited about the fact that at least the people's will is considered in all of these.
Yeah,
I mean,
local politics is not the same as national, right? Local politics is about. Now, let me tell you this. I've said this a million times, and I'm going to say it again. INEC is very, very vital to the Nigeria's electoral process. But unfortunately, INEC has been the key player in the rigging of elections in this country, right from the start, right from 1999. I can tell you that before 1999, the only election that perhaps was real and really happened like it should was the Abiola election. And like they usually touted to be the only free and fair election in Nigeria. And it has been the only free and fair election in Nigeria ever since. Now, from 1999 till now, it hasn't been about votes. Every election from 1999 till now has been rigged. Mark my words, right? And 2023 isn't going to be different. But the only thing different about 2023 is that Nigerian electorate has become very much awake. Like they say, the American slang, they say now woke. The Nigerian electorate is woke now, right? And so we are more informed about the electoral process. We are more aware about, of what's happening. Now, a lot of people have gone out to get their PVCs. There's an unprecedented, amount of PVCs registered in 1 year, ever in the history of Nigeria. And like I said, all of these processes have left a digital footprint. But why am I worried? I am worried that the same player who has been active in the rigging of elections is at its game again.
Why do you think INEC would do that? Because even the president has come out clearly to tell APC members that, look, he is not going to interfere in INEC's result or whatever elections that are coming up. So why do you think?
Talk is cheap. We've seen evidence already of the game that INEC plays, right?
What was the evidence?
We've seen videos of, how do you call them, PVCs thrown on the highway, thrown out at the highway. We've seen videos of PVCs stashed in water channels. And most of these PVCs belong to Southerners, right? Now, we've seen videos of PVCs buried somewhere and mistakenly dug up. Who's doing all that? Who has access to that amount of PVCs? Who but INEC? Who in this country has access to that number of PVCs belonging to Nigerians, electorates, who have been disenfranchised and who are going to be disenfranchised. And nobody's actually talking about this. Now, the point is, that's one way they're trying to rig the election, by destroying PVCs. Now, on the other hand, something else is happening. They're telling us now that millions of PVCs registered in the last 10 months are invalid. Now, if the new registrations, millions of new registrations are invalid, whose fault is that?
The INEC said that the last registration 10 months ago.
Yes. Millions of registrations are already invalid. INEC has said that.
Really?
Yes. Millions are already going to be disenfranchised. So the point is, if these registrations are invalid, who caused them to be invalid? Now, that is INEC, right? And so if it's a fault from your system or a fault from your office, then what you should do to ensure that you do not disenfranchise the Nigerian electorate is to give them another chance to get re-registered, either by extending the date or moving the election, so that to ensure that no Nigerian is disenfranchised. But INEC is playing a game, and nobody's asking INEC questions. Now, let me let you know what I know about the electoral process. The other way this election is going to be rigged is that every device that's going to be used in this election is programmable. Now, the question is, who supplies the equipment and who programmed them? Labour Party is not talking about this. Of course, PDP and APC will never talk about it because it's always worked in their favor. Other political parties are not talking about that. Now, what we should be talking about now is to make sure that every process is free and fair. And so one of the things we should do now is to invite independent techies to come and run an integrity test on the equipment that are going to be used on 2023. Independent, not people from the UK government, not people from the American government, not people from the European Union, because all of these people are colluding to ensure that elections are rigged in Nigeria. I am telling you for a fact. And so we need to employ independent technological people, techies, to come and run an integrity test on our equipment to ensure that they've not been programmed to favor the ruling party.
We've uncovered a well-orchestrated grand compromise of the electoral register, falsification and upload of fake registration, move to nullify the use of the bimodal voter accreditation system BVAS machine, complete takeover of INEC and the removal of its chairman from office, and traceable offenses of rigging the 2023 general election. The issues we shall address today go to the very foundation of the hope of our nation to hold credible, acceptable, free and fair general election next year. About 4 months ago, we intercepted credible intelligence about the grand design of the APC to compromise the 2023 general election and deny Nigerians their sovereign rights to freely choose their leaders. This intelligence was intercepted after the plan was shared in details to some of the APC governors and for them to play their own roles. We laid in wait, collected our hardcore evidence and proof, and today we believe that Nigerians deserve to know the kind of party that is running the affairs of our nation and the imminent threat that can destroy the 2023 general election.
And so these are my concerns, that INEC is playing a funny game, and I guarantee you, mark my words if you're listening to me now, 2023 is going to be rigged and against Labour Party and peterobi. But Nigerians should begin to think now what they are going to do when that happens, because is it going to happen? It's going to happen. peterobi is a major threat to PDP and APC. They are having sleepless nights. And so the talk in the airwaves is peterobi, peterobi, peterobi. Right now they're trying to invalidate his emergence as the Labour Party candidate. As though that is not enough, they're also asking INEC to ban him for accepting diaspora funding. What's wrong with accepting diaspora funding? These diasporans are Nigerians who have contributed on a yearly basis billions of dollars to the Nigerian economy through remittances. And so they're good enough to give you remittances that is actually the stronghold of your economy right now. Because the remittances are much more than what we're gaining from our single earning product, which is crude oil. The major income from right now for Nigeria is coming from diaspora remittances. And so you've denied them votes. You've said in the National Assembly that even though they are Nigerians, that they are not qualified to vote. So their money is good for Nigeria, but their votes are not good for Nigeria. And now they can't vote, but they want to support the candidate financially. And you're now saying ban the candidate because he's received money from Nigerians living overseas. This is hate. These people want to ensure that Nigeria continues to live in abject poverty. And Nigerians continue to suffer. And so, Charles, I say again, 2023 is going to be rigged. I'm still going to explain to you why I know it's going to be rigged. peterobi is not just running against APC and PDP. peterobi is running against the West.
Okay, before we come to that,
Yes.
you made mention of something about the fact that some elections, some registration done 10 months ago
Yes.
are invalid, and INEC said that. I'm not
Yes.
too sure it's particularly very correct.
Okay.
But just to put that in perspective, in sometime in April, that was when this happened. The Independent National Electoral Commission in the month of April said over 45% of completed voters registration across the country are invalid.
Okay.
INEC Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu disclosed this during a press briefing on the outcome of the first and second quarters of the continuous voter registration exercise. Said invalid registration will not be included in the voters register. He said, quote, sadly, it seems that many registrants, either out of ignorance that they do not need to re-register if they had done so before, or a belief that our system will not detect this infraction, have gone out to register again. This is despite repeated warnings by the Commission against this illegal action. So,
Charles, that's absolute nonsense. Listen, whose duty it is to ensure before you initiate a new system? It's a simple question of, have you registered before? Do you have a PVC? You guys have been running elections for years, so it's not the first time you encountered these kinds of situations. And so why aren't you asking the people before you initiate a new one? It's your duty to ask them, have you been registered before? Did you ever own a PVC?
So some of them
What's
lie.
wrong? No. That's not
it's
it.
possible
That's
that they lie,
not
and
it.
so they're detecting it.
No. Come on,
And so
Charles.
because of that,
Forget
40%
about
of the
it.
registration-
Forget about it. INEC will look for to legitimize what they are doing. They won't just tell you that it's invalid and not give you a reason for that. That's a cooked up story, to sway the wrath of Nigerians. I guarantee you that it's a ploy to disenfranchise Nigerians. Because the truth is, the first question you should ask is, have you been registered before? And they say no. What do? Put your fingerprint there. If they put their fingerprint there, it comes up on the system that their name has already been on the system. But you're not doing that. No matter how they tell a lie, everything, what I love about digital processes, like I said, is that they leave a digital footprint. You cannot deceive the system unless the people running the system are actually corrupt. Right? So if you ask that question, hey, have you ever been registered before? And he says no. Okay, please, can I have your fingerprint on the reader? Once it places its fingerprint on the reader, it reveals the truth. And so how do you go on to register them? And it doesn't come up on the system. That's a lie. That's a fat lie.
Okay,
INEC is the problem, right? INEC, mark my words, is a major player in the rigging of elections in Nigeria. And so, unless INEC has repented and decided to do the right thing, they're still going to rig the election. And that's why peterobi is the only candidate that's really working very hard. Because he's counting on the votes of the people. Every other person is counting on rigging the elections, and that's why they're not working as hard. They've always rigged elections, and so they're believing it's going to work for them right now. But they see the upsurge in the registrations. And so they also understand that there is an amount of registrations that you would have, and if these registrations, and if these candidates go for peterobi, it would actually be overwhelmingly clear that he won the elections, and you really can't rig it. Even if you rig it, like I said, we're going to eventually print out the digital map and use that to prove actually that this man collected most of the votes. Again, I bring this up. I'm worried that these devices can be, programmed in such a way that, for every vote count that is cast, 3 goes to the ruling party and 1 goes to the opposition. These things are possible. It's technology, it's possible. And that's why I said in one of the interactions I had with you, I think, that it's high time we brought the blockchain technology into the electoral process. And then that way, it will be impossible to rig the elections. Because the beautiful thing about blockchain is you have thousands of computers processing, the same entry. And so if one computer is rigged, you can actually call up the other one and have the same evidence. So that's the kind of technology we need to bring into the electoral process, and then it wouldn't be dependent on INEC to actually decide who wins the election. It will be the system actually that decides who wins the elections. So I am worried that 2023 is still going to be rigged. But the thing is that Nigerians will have to prepare themselves for what they're going to do when that happens. And one of the things that I suggest is that every wealthy person who wants to save Nigeria, prepare yourself to either come together as a group or individually enter, start litigation processes against INEC and every other person who we know rigs the election.
All right, let's talk about the fact that you mentioned earlier that peterobi is running against the West.
Absolutely.
How possible is that?
Now, I have a lot of video evidence, but on account of time, we won't be able to play them today. Hopefully, me and you will plan a show where we can actually play a lot of this video and audio evidence. Now, every election in Nigeria since the beginning of Nigeria, the Nigeria's democratic process, right from the first republic, has been rigged, right? Now, if you guys want, you can go to Google and Google Harold Smith. Right? Harold Smith is a guy, an Englishman who joined the colonial service in 1954 and was deployed to Nigeria in 1955. He worked in the Ministry of Labour headquarters under the administration of the Governor General. He's a British man. And so recently he gave an interview where he confessed that they rigged the first election in Nigeria, the first ever election in Nigeria, in favour of the North.
Yeah. You are alleged that the British government rigged the first and most important election in the history of Nigeria in 1959 in favor of the North. Am I correct?
Yes.
How long were you in Nigeria for?
From 1955 to 1960. And we were based in Lagos. I was on the staff of the Department of Labour. I was largely occupied with employment problems, all the employment exchanges, and statistics, and international reports, and was kept pretty busy. I was also stationed in Lagos in charge of the capital and the port. I was the port labour officer as well, and I also devised a port labour scheme and later a social security scheme, which was one of the first in Africa, which guaranteed workers some income after they'd finished work. It was a providence scheme. As I say, it was called the National Providence Scheme, and I was very proud to have put that on the statute book.
I was going to ask you what your role is. You've mentioned 3 important. Is there any particular name given to your office while you were there?
Just Labour Officer.
I was a labour officer, a senior civil servant.
Okay.
I only intended to stay in Lagos initially for 2 tours of duty. Although, because of this conflict with the elections, there were difficulties. Actually, government wouldn't let me leave the civil service. They were determined that I should stay in the civil service after my 2 tours. And I was offered very considerable incentives, including a knighthood, to stay and work for government. Primarily this was because I had access to state secrets. I learned, and the Governor General himself confirmed this to me, that the elections were rigged, contrived. The intention was that the North should rule Nigeria. Even in '56, the northern leaders were very proud and were saying, if they couldn't run Nigeria, never mind elections. they might not join Nigeria. They might leave. And we all thought, well, how would they survive? There were no industries. There's not a great deal of agriculture, some groundnuts in the north. This wasn't very practical at all. And then it was, the Governor-General seemed to be thinking that the North couldn't, even if it won an election, rule Nigeria by itself. The South wouldn't stand for that. So there had to be a partner, either the Igbos in the east or the Yoruba in the west, to team up with the North. What he didn't want was for the two southern parties, the Igbo and the Yoruba, to team up to form the government, because he believed the North wouldn't tolerate that and talked about leaving the federation. So as I learned, in a small way at first, but very rapidly I learned about the election fixing, and as I say, this was confirmed to me by the Governor-General. He actually said that he wanted me to know the truth because he wanted me to know how much trouble I was in.
You mentioned statistics, you were collecting figures. Yes. Is that for labor and unemployed people only, or general?
Primarily, but obviously my interest was in the population
of
generally.
Nigeria.
Yes, and Awolowo, the Yoruba leader of the action group,
yep,
and Chief Enaharo, they too, other people were saying, where are all these millions of people in the north? Where are they? We're going up there to campaign. We want to know, you know. And you see all these, you know, thousands of miles of not very developed countryside, and yet the northerners are claiming that their voting registration figures are larger than in the south, you know, larger, far more people up there. Well, actually, if you went through the Igbo land, you know, Enugu and that, you saw lots and lots of people. If you went to Ibadan, again, Ibadan teeming, you know, with millions of people. But we didn't actually see many northerners, and obviously not many northerners at that time came to Lagos. So this did arouse suspicion. Now, the Europeans, you know, not stupid, we are watching what's going on in Nigeria, and we too are beginning to feel there's something not quite right here, that maybe the elections are not going to be as straightforward as they're meant to be. Nigeria was being described as the showcase of democracy, and it was expected that the nationalist leaders would win through. But actually, when the election results were announced by the Governor-General, before the vote was even in, he didn't vote, didn't count for that, he didn't wait for that. I have to tell you, the British were counting the votes, and the British cannot be trusted. They look after their friends. Loyalty is the big thing for the British. And we were friends with the emirs of the north. We looked on people like Enaharo and Awolowo as rather dangerous people. They might even be communists. That's ridiculous, actually. They couldn't be communists in 1,000 years. But this was a sort of thing that was being said. And we were, Europeans, were getting a bit worried about all this. It wasn't quite the honest, straightforward election that we were hoping for.
Apart from Professor Anderson and Dr. Patrick Wilmot that supported your submission on the rigged election, there were other people who also served in the colonial office in your days, I mean, who opposed to this submission?
Initially, I was warned of what was going on by my senior officer, a Major Bunker. I didn't know, and I knew that the Governor-General had directed me to take all the office staff of the Ministry of Labour to help Chief Okoti Igbo in politicking in Warri. And this was most irregular, and I refused to do this. Having refused an order, I know what the drill is. You resign. I resign my post. That is the proper thing to do. What they did then was rather devious. They persuaded me to withdraw my resignation And when I did, they sacked me. It didn't go through, but I thought this was a bit low after I'd resigned and was prepared to leave the country. This was not very nice behaviour. They later withdrew this and said that I had been of some service to the state and actually commended me for what I had done and said I could leave Nigeria with splendid testimonials, and we shook hands on this. And this was done with the recognition of the Deputy Governor-General, Sir Ralph Grey. And then I left Nigeria the first time and took up a job as a personnel officer, a very big job, with the Esso refinery. And then government came after me, declared that I was a traitor and I had betrayed the British people, ought to be imprisoned. And I lost that job. And then they came to me again and said, it's all been a big mistake. Dreadful mistake. I'm a jolly decent chap, you know, Oxford chap. And they put me on a plane straight back to Nigeria, where I'd make up for the time I'd been away. There was a great deal of good work for me to do. And we fell for this. We shouldn't have gone back, but we did.
Now, if you recall what you said about the role of the Governor General and the attitude of the British government in particular, regarding the fear that Awolowo, Okutiebo, and the lot of them from the south are dangerous, is there a particular reason? Why the fear from the British government? Is it that they don't want to release or relinquish Nigeria? They still want to control Nigeria?
They knew that the North would do as they said after independence. If it had any, the North would just, because it was their habit, they liked the British, whereas the nationalists were an unknown factor. Actually, when they took the flag down and hoisted the Nigerian flag, not one of the major nationalist politicians was there. They weren't even on the platform. This was incredible. These were the people who had sought independence. The people in the North didn't want independence. They didn't want the British to leave. So this was a farce. And for most Europeans who were very close and watching this, we were disgusted. We thought this really had been manipulated, this election. It was unworthy. It was unworthy of the British people, this. This was no honest, straightforward thing that you would expect Britain, the mother of parliaments, to do. This was cheap and low and criminal. And I opposed it. And I opposed it then, and I've opposed it ever since. And I'm telling you the truth. And I was warned, if I told you this state secret, my life could be forfeit.
Earlier on, you said the British government wanted the North in alliance with either of the southern region, either with the Yorubas or with the Igbos.
But Awolowo,
without which they cannot
they can't do it this
rule the country.
The problem was that Awolowo was a highly principled man.
Okay.
You didn't talk to Awolowo about squalid deals and fixing things. Awolowo was not that kind of person. If you read his books, this man was a world statesman. And his young lieutenant, Chief Enaharo, was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. However, they did do a deal with Zik, Dr. Azikiwe, from the East. Dr. Azikiwe, there was this big problem in Nigeria. It's the same big problem in America and in Britain. How do you get funds to fight elections? The candidates in Nigeria had no money, but they did have marketing boards, which were a kind of semi-nationalized industry. And they borrowed money from the marketing boards. But there was a suspicion that Dr. Azikiwe, who had formed his own bank, the African Continental Bank, was actually bankrupt, but he was borrowing very large sums of money from the marketing boards and not necessarily repaying the loans. We knew this. We had a great secret service. All the politicians' phones were tapped. All the politicians' mail was opened. Everything that any major politician did in Nigeria, we knew in hours. We watched. We knew all that was going on.
Are you saying, in essence, that Dr. Azikiwe took money?
He was blackmailed by the British to do our bidding. We told Dr. Azikiwe that he could go to prison if an inquiry was carried out into his bank and his financial circumstances. However, we would not want to be vindictive if Dr. Azikiwe was cooperative in helping forward the plans that we had made in the best interests of Nigeria. Dr. Azikiwe had nothing in common with the northern politicians. He loathed the northern politicians. But Dr. Azikiwe went north and did as he was told. And what he was promised was this: the real power, effective power, would be in the hands of the northern emirs. However, it would look great if the president was Dr. Azikiwe and he was given a field marshal's uniform and an admiral's uniform. He asked, please, could he have a row of medals? But they said, well, no, that was a bit difficult, to get the medals. So when the ambassadors started arriving, he was known to be asking people from foreign countries, perhaps they had a medal for his uniform. We thought this was terrible, but it was said that this happened. He was very vain. And for a time, he functioned as first the Governor General, and then when Nigeria became a republic, as the president. But he had no power. And when he did try to tell the army, he said, I'm the field marshal, the army has got to do with this. They said, hey, you're just a ceremonial figure. You have no power. The Prime Minister, Balewa, gives us our orders. So there was a feeling then that there was going to be trouble.
Okay, so from that time till now, the British have been behind the decision of every person who's ruled Nigeria from that time till now.